talking about guitar, there's few models that are more legendary than the Martin D18 or D28. This design dates back to over 100 years ago, and it's become the standard which all guitars in this style are measured against. But today you can get several different levels of the D18 or D28, the Dreadnought from Martin. So in today's video, we're gonna take a look at 5 different levels of Martin Dreadnought, talk about the good stuff, the bad stuff, and I'm gonna tell you which one I would buy if I was in the market for this legendary model. Before we go any further, I want to quickly thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Sweetwater. They kindly sent out all 5 of these guitars for me to check out. I will be sending them back, I'm not keeping them, but I will have affiliate links in the description box down below if you want to pick up one of these guitars, or if you want to just do any kind of shopping, maybe for the holidays from Sweetwater. If you buy anything through those links, I earn a small commission, which helps me out in keeping this channel going. It doesn't cost you any extra. More information about these guitars will be available in the description box down below. Huge thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring today's video. With all that out of the way, let's look at our first model. So starting off with the least expensive guitar in the lineup today, we've got the Martin D-X2E coming in right at $699 US at the time of filming this video. Now this is definitely the budget option in Martin's Dreadnought lineup. You are getting a solid spruce top and scalloped X bracing, which really does matter, but that's kind of where the similarities between this and the bigger D18 end. Instead of having solid woods on the back and sides, we have a laminate wood, which is not uncommon for guitars of this price point. But in order to kind of like spruce up the look of the back and sides, for lack of a better term, they've actually printed a picture of a rosewood grain. Now this is not like a computer generated picture. This is actually a photo of one of the guitars from their vintage collection, but this isn't real wood grain. This is a picture that is printed onto the back and sides. And it does look nice from a distance if you don't know what it is, but knowing that this is a laminate back and side guitar with printed fake wood grain on it just feels like, well, it just feels cheap. You can also see other places where they're saving money. There's no binding anywhere on the guitar. The tuning machines on this particular guitar are not great. Tuning this guitar up compared to every other one in the lineup is a little bit more difficult, but you do get a pickup here. It's their basic built-in pickup with a built-in tuner here in the sound hole, which is actually kind of a nice touch. And here's what it sounds like. For the record, I'm mic'd up right now with my AEA R98, which is a stereo ribbon microphone. It's just off camera here, but I've got it placed about where I would mic this up if I were recording it. And then from there, I'm going into the WA MPX, which is a tube-driven mic preamp from Warm Audio. And then from that, we're going into the Rupert Neve Designs Master Bus Transformer, where I'm just using a little touch of compression to grab like the loudest notes, the loudest transients, and a little bit of their super silk circuit there, but I'm not adding any EQ or anything like that. And the reason I have this setup for the signal flow is this is how I would record one of these guitars. And I imagine there's gonna be some people in the comments that push back and say, you shouldn't be affecting the guitar signal at all. I wanna hear it just raw and plain as it sounds, which I understand, except for you don't ever listen to a guitar directly from a microphone, not when you're playing it and not when you're listening to it in the room. So for me, all of the guitars that you're gonna hear today are going through the exact same signal chain with the exact same settings. Nothing is changing in between them. And again, I'm doing this because this is how I would actually use these guitars in the real world. A really nice mic, a great preamp, and a little bit of processing through a really great outboard piece of gear. And this will give you, I think, the most accurate representation of what these guitars sound like under a microphone in a recording environment. So overall, this guitar sounds okay. It's not mind-blowing by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't feel that great. Like the materials, the back and sides, honestly, they feel like plastic. And it kind of sounds like plastic too. However, it is nice to see that there's a solid spruce top with Martin's scalloped X bracing. That is what matters. With an acoustic guitar, the top is called the soundboard. This is what is producing the sound from the vibration of the strings, and you want a solid piece of wood there. So anytime you have an acoustic guitar that's got a laminate top, like the back and sides on this guitar are, to me, that's not really considered like a real acoustic, in my opinion. So for 700 bucks, it's okay. Okay, next up in the lineup, we've got the D12E coming in at $1349 US. Now this is a considerable step up compared to the D-X2E. We actually have solid wood back and sides, not laminate back and sides like the DX. Now this is sapele, this is not mahogany, even though it looks a lot like mahogany. And sapele is a little bit less expensive wood to use. It's more sustainably sourced. Now this is built in Mexico like the DX2E at Martin's Mexico factory. But overall, you get some nice appointments here. You're getting a solid spruce top, the scalloped X bracing, a much nicer set of tuners. These are open geared Grover tuners, which are so much better than the stock tuners on the DX2E. They feel much nicer. It's a higher gear ratio, so it's easier to kind of fine tune each string and get everything dialed in. And from a sound perspective, I think it is a significant step up in the sound as well. Good for fingerstyle playing. I mean, Dreadnoughts in general are not necessarily known as great fingerstyle guitars. They're much more prominent in like the bluegrass flat picking scene. And if you're a heavier handed strummer like myself, a Dreadnought is great because this body shape really holds up to heavy, heavy strumming. And the guitar responds well. It doesn't necessarily collapse under your right hand or your picking hand like smaller body guitars can if you really dig into them. So overall, I think this is a significant step up compared to the DX2E. Okay, so now we're on to the standard, the absolute benchmark, the D18. Spruce top, mahogany back and sides. This is the modern day equivalent of the classic Martin Dreadnought. It's coming in at $27.99, so we're taking a pretty considerable step up in price. And obviously this is made at the Martin factory in Nazareth, Pennsylvania, which, you know, a quick little trivia fact, the weight written by the band, Robbie Robertson is quoted as saying that the first line of that song, "Just Pulled Into Nazareth, was feeling about half past dead," comes from the fact that if you look inside the sound hole of your Martin guitar, it says CF Martin & Co. Nazareth, PA. And when he was writing that song, he saw that and thought, just pulled into Nazareth. Now, like I said, we're getting the solid Sitka spruce top, solid mahogany back and sides. This is the classic D18 combination. And we have a forward shifted scalloped X bracing in this guitar. You've got the nice open geared Grover tuners. You've got an ebony bridge, an ebony fingerboard. Pretty simple standard appointments. I mean, it's a D18. What more do you want? To me, when I look at a D18, it's like what someone pictures an acoustic guitar as. Like if you just asked a normal person on the street, what does an acoustic guitar look like? They're going to think of a D18, whether they know it or not. And aesthetically, it's a little plain. It's a little boring. And sonically, it sounds great. And again, I think we're seeing another step up in sound quality, definitely a step up in playability and feel. However, to me, sitting in front of this microphone with the headphones on, the sound kind of matches the aesthetic of this guitar, which is a little plain. It has just kind of the standard acoustic guitar sound to it, which there's a reason for. By many measures, the D18 is the standard acoustic guitar, but sound-wise, it's good. It's really good. It's not blowing my mind. Certainly not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty well balanced. It's loud. Getting pretty decent like note separation in the chords, especially a little bit like more dense chord. But it's still articulate and punchy. It's a D18. What else can you say? Okay, so now we're on to the D18 Modern Deluxe coming in at $37.99. This guitar is pretty interesting. It is a D18 at heart, it's a Dreadnought with a solid spruce top, mahogany back and sides, scalloped X bracing, but it's got some interesting features in it that separate it from the D18 that we just played and give it that $1,000 premium on the price tag. Now, the biggest difference here is the top and the braces of this guitar have undergone what Martin calls their VTS system, Vintage Tone System, kind of a weird name. Vintage Tone System, isn't it? Essentially what this is Martin's version of torrefaction, torrefying the wood. Now, if you're not familiar, torrefaction is a process in which you bake a piece of wood in a special oven at a very specific temperature, not necessarily in a vacuum, but without the presence of oxygen. And what this does is it dries out the wood, and it also takes some of the organic materials like lignin and cellulose that are contained inside the cell structure of the wood, and it drives those out as well, making the wood lighter and more responsive to string energy. Now, this is what naturally happens to any acoustic guitar as it ages. This is why acoustic guitars sound different, oftentimes sound better the older they get. It's because they dry out. The overall sound of the guitar gets a little sweeter, a little drier, for lack of a better word. There's many factors that cause that, but because the wood is drier and lighter, it's more responsive to string energy. They're oftentimes louder. They respond faster to your pick. They just sound better. And this is part of the reason that vintage acoustic guitars, especially vintage Martins from that pre-war era, are so highly sought after. Because ideally, nothing will get you that sort of sweet, aged, vintage acoustic sound other than time. Enter torrefaction, or Martin's VTS system. This is their attempt at trying to artificially age the top and the braces of this guitar to give it a lot of the same sonic characteristics. And it definitely does have an impact on the sound of the guitar. Now, this to me does not sound like a vintage Martin, and this sounds like a new guitar. No getting around it. But to me, this has a little bit more character than the standard D18. It does sound a little drier, a little woodier, even compared to the standard D18. It is a little bit louder, and that is in large part due to the top, but it's also due to some of the other sort of modern appointments on this guitar. They have what they call these liquid metal bridge pins here, which are considerably, I think, lighter and transfer more energy into the top of the guitar. Yes, the bridge pins do make a difference. My friend Chris from Driftwood Guitars made an amazing video about this on his channel last year. I'll link down below. But there's also a carbon fiber bridge plate underneath the bridge of the guitar. Now, all acoustic guitars have a bridge plate. It's a solid piece of wood that is underneath the bridge that helps distribute the string energy, the tension from the bridge into the rest of the top of the guitar. And the idea behind having a carbon fiber bridge plate is that it's lighter, it's stiffer, it does a better job of transferring the string energy into the top of the guitar. And then you also get, gold tuners, gold colored frets. These are not actual gold frets, obviously. And an asymmetrical neck carve, which I have to admit, I really like. Okay, now we're on to the big boy. This is the D28 Authentic 1937 VTS. This guitar, wait for it, is an eye-watering $9,499. Now, the elephant in the room here is obviously this is not a D18, this is a D28. So this guitar has rosewood back and sides instead of mahogany. This is Guatemalan rosewood to be exact, but we're still getting a beautiful spruce top. The forward shifted hand scalloped X bracing here. I don't know why they decided to differentiate as hand scalloped. I believe all of Martin's bracing after a certain level is hand scalloped, but regardless. The idea with this guitar is that you're buying a new guitar that is as close to a real 1937 D28 as is possible. This is Martin's version of like Gibson's Murphy Lab, for example, where they're taking modern Les Pauls but trying to build them as close to a 58 or 59 or 60 Les Paul as possible. This is Martin's attempt at that. And the way they're doing it was by studying several examples of real 1937 D28s, which some people consider to be sort of the holy grail of the D28, that particular year, 37. And there are some subtle differences in the body shape, that particular Dreadnought body shape of 37 that Martin has employed here. Now, I don't know what the exact differences are between a modern D18, D28, or this one, but supposedly they went through a painstaking measurement and study of several real pre-war Martins to produce this guitar. Now, it does have the VTS system on the top, and I believe on the back and sides here. So the whole guitar has been torrefied with Martin's system. And they've also reliced this guitar, which, as far as I can tell, is a relatively new thing in the acoustic world. It's a very, very subtle relic. We just have some slight wear on the finish here. And they're also employing some more traditional construction methods, like using hide glue here instead of a more modern synthetic glue that you would find on some of the other guitars. Now, hide glue, yes, it's correct. Yes, it does a thing. The ethics of it are a little weird for me. That's a whole other discussion. But I mean, this guitar, it sounds real good. This guitar is definitely the best sounding out of all of them. I'll just go ahead and say it. I mean, when you hear it, not just under a microphone, but here in the room and as you're playing it with it in your lap, I mean, the guitar just rings. The notes jump out of the guitar. The other guitars do sound great. They sound phenomenal, but this is a step above. Okay, so it's time to rank these guitars. And actually, I already shot this whole section of video, but after spending time in the edit, listening to the guitars under microphone with headphones on while not playing them, mixing them, editing the video down, I've actually changed my mind pretty substantially on the rating of these guitars. So let's start with last place. The D-X2E, or is it D2XE? Can I keep that straight? It's built completely to a price point, and they're trying to compete in that, mid-entry level acoustic guitar market. I just think for $700, your money would be better spent elsewhere. If I was in the market for a guitar of this price point, I would actually be looking used, because I think your money would go way farther buying a slightly used, well-loved acoustic guitar for $700 than something like this brand new off the shelf. I just don't like it. It doesn't sound very good by any standard, in my opinion. Also, the back and sides, I get why they've done the printed wood grain thing on the back, but I think it's just a cheap gimmick. It feels cheap, it sounds cheap. It also shows fingerprints in a weird way. Do you see that on screen? It's just not a great guitar. Honestly, I just can't recommend this in any capacity, especially for $700. I think you should look elsewhere. Okay, now this one was a bit tough for me, but in fourth place, I have to put the 1937 VTS Authentic. What do they call this? The D28 Authentic 1937 VTS. Look, there's no question, this is the best sounding guitar here. I think it's the best looking guitar here. It feels great to play. It sounds incredible under microphone. But for almost $10,000, actually after taxes and everything, you're gonna be probably over $10,000. This is a really, really hard thing to recommend unless you are specifically in the market for something like this. If it were me and I was gonna drop $10,000 on an acoustic guitar, I'm gonna go in the vintage market. And yeah, I'm not gonna get a real 1937 D28 or D18 for that money, not even anywhere close to that money. I'd have to add a couple of zeros onto that. But I could still get something really cool, something player grade, something that sounds amazing, something that has had several decades to open up and age and dry out. And I think $10,000 gets you a lot of guitar in the vintage acoustic market, which isn't necessarily the case when we're talking about vintage electrics, especially Fenders and Gibsons. Those prices have gone so far beyond the pale, especially if you're looking for something from the late 50s and the early 60s. 10 grand isn't really going to get you that far, but in the acoustic world, you can still get a really, really great vintage acoustic for that 10 grand mark. And while I love this guitar, it sounds amazing, I just can't recommend it for $10,000 new. If you do go on to sell this, it's going to be sold at a loss as a used guitar. So yeah, maybe if you're interested in one of these, because it is a great guitar, look on the used market. Okay, now at third place, we've got the D18 Modern Deluxe. This is a really great guitar. If you know me, you know I'm not typically the modern guitar kind of guy, but I think the choices that Martin has made here to put these modern appointments on this guitar are really smart. I like the fact that it has the VTS torrefied top and braces. I like the fact that there's carbon fiber under the bridge plate. I like the fact that they've got these super lightweight bridge pins on here, and the neck shape is actually really great. It feels comfortable and a bit fast to play, which is awesome. The reason this doesn't make it higher on the list is the price, first and foremost. It's $1,000 more than the standard D18. And while you are getting more for your money there, I don't know that it's quite enough for that $1,000 premium. For instance, I would have liked to have seen more carbon fiber put into this guitar, namely in the neck. And I feel like Martin could have done that here. They're already using carbon fiber on the bridge plate. Why not put a pair of carbon fiber rods in the neck and really lean into that modern appointment? Overall though, it's a great sounding guitar. It plays really well. It's really nice. It's comfortable. I like the modern appointments. It's cool. So then coming in at second place is the D12E. For under $1,500, you're getting a well-made classic Martin Dreadnought with a pickup, with a built-in tuner, and it even says Martin on the headstock, even though this guitar is built in their Mexico factory. The fit and finish on all of these guitars, actually, including the D2XE, has been excellent. There's not anything that's immediately jumping out to me as a problem. The fretwork on all these guitars is really great. I think this is a really good bang for buck guitar. For under 1,500 bucks, you're getting the classic D18 formula. Yes, it's not, you know, your typical mahogany back and sides. You're getting the sapele, but it still sounds good. It looks like real mahogany. And the thing that really matters is you're getting solid wood on the top, back, and sides. No laminate anywhere in this guitar. Now, personally, if it were me, I would purchase this without the pickup, without the built-in tuner, because for one, I typically don't use acoustics plugged up very often, and if I did, I would just install my own pickup. It's a lot of value for money. I really like it. I think a lot of people that are in the market for a D18 but don't want to spend, you know, $2,000, $3,000, $10,000, I think the D12 is right in a Goldilocks zone for you. And so in first place, obviously that leaves us with the classic D18. My initial impressions of this guitar were it's kind of bland, it's kind of boring. You know, it doesn't look very exciting. It doesn't sound very exciting. But after spending time in the edit and spending time mixing and listening to the recorded acoustic guitars, sound-wise, this comes very, very close to the two more expensive guitars, the modern Deluxe and the 1937 Authentic. And I think it comes in at the right price. You're getting the classic Martin formula, the D18, made in Nazareth, Pennsylvania at the Martin factory for 2,800 bucks. That feels right to me. That feels good. This is the classic D18. This is the standard. If you buy this guitar, you play it, you love it, you own it for decades, it's gonna open up. It's going to develop its own character. It's going to develop its own wear, especially if you're gigging it, you're traveling with it. Depending on how much you play it, depending on where you live, depending on the life that this guitar lives, it's going to develop its own sound, its own feel, its own look, which will be true of all of these guitars, by the way, not just this one. But I think there's something cool about starting with the classic D18, the Martin Dreadnought, and making it your own, giving it time to open up and break in and become your guitar. I think there's actually something really cool about that. I think if you're in the market for the Martin Dreadnought sound, you should just go with the Martin Dreadnought. They still make it. It's still the same formula. It's still made in the same factory, in the same town that the originals were made in. So if it were my money and I were in the market for a D18, I would just buy a D18. Those are my thoughts. What do you think? I'd love to hear what your list would be in the comments section down below. Once again, huge thanks to Sweetwater for sending these guitars out. I'm gonna box these all back up and send them back. So you'll see the links in the description box. They might even be to these specific guitars if you want to pick one of them up. If you do, I'll earn a small commission, which helps me out in keeping this channel going. It doesn't cost you any extra, and I greatly appreciate it. And if you like this video, I've got a whole series of these videos linked in the playlist below. So click that and continue to nerd out. My name is Rhett Shull. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.